Hey everyone, welcome to In the Arena, where we talk about we talk with the builders and investors shaping the frontier of AI and crypto. I'm Andrew Hill, CEO of Recall, and I'm joined by Jonathan King, who leads in AI investments at Coinbase Ventures. They're one of the most active firms driving innovation in the on-chain economy. They've been doing it for quite a few years and have uh, been experimenting with a lot of different theses in the space and seen things work, seen things not work, and have some really great insights to about what's coming next. So, Jonathan's focus spans like many of the different topics that we're all excited about, from AI, stable coins, DeFi, real world assets. Um, Generally connected by, and I think maybe he can put some fine touches on this in some questions here, but generally connected by this core thesis that crypto is becoming the trust layer for intelligent systems and markets. And we're going to explore how Coinbase sees the convergence of crypto and AI specifically, and how on-chain infrastructure enables verifiable intelligence and all sorts of amazing new use cases and utility, and what makes it or what it takes to build systems that are transparent, aligned, and open. So, thank you very much for taking your time with us here today, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you've been writing about the kind of AI crypto domain for a while, and I know
Mhm.
that we've been through even a few kind of mini cycles testing out different theses and trying to figure out what will work, and where there's product market fit and use cases that are different and interesting in crypto. But backing up a bit, what really made on-chain AI or the convergence of AI and crypto more generally really click for you?
Yeah, so I think like it all comes back to probably like in 2022, right? When we saw like the launch of ChatGPT, it quickly became like one of the fastest growing consumer apps. Like I think it crossed like 100 million users in less than 6 months. And so when we started to see, kind of the rise of generative AI specifically, then the thought process, came together around, okay, do we really want AI and its, very powerful capabilities and, very transformative technology to be centralized and controlled by just, a few entities? And so fast forward to 2023, that's when we start to see this whole idea around, I would say, decentralized AI, which is essentially, how do you democratize access to, AI resources? So things around compute to models to having verifiable data, and how do you introduce, the proper incentive mechanisms so that way the contributors, us as users that, are contributing to that data where our data is being trained on, how do you make sure that the incentives are properly aligned? And so, we made several investments across the stack, right? Whether that was into model networks to user-owned data networks. And fast forward to, I would say, late 2024 to 2025, the robustness of that infrastructure started to give rise to what we call on-chain AI, right? And so that's really bringing AI into crypto. And these are things around, how do you use AI agents for, being a robo advisor of sorts, right? And actually transacting on behalf of users to optimizing yields, right? Yield markets change 24/7. As users, I don't expect us to, be awake 24/7 to take advantage of those opportunities. So using agents to fulfill that role. And then I would say the last area we're most excited about is really like this convergence of, AI agents and stable coins, right? If you think about AI agents and their objectives and the plethora of tasks they need to complete in order to fulfill those objectives, that might require them to pay for content. That might require them to pay another agent to help, complete a task and that aligns with that objective. And so thinking about stable coins as a programmable form of money, we're really excited of what we're seeing in terms of like this whole emerging agentic commerce sector, to really bring these two powerful technologies together.
Totally. Yeah, and it's so interesting to see, you know, alignment and work with players like Cloudflare really building the pipes of the internet and seeing kind of that from the other side, maybe not always being crypto native, though they have a long history of doing lots of interesting things in this area. But yeah, that's so cool. So like you kind of in my like playing back of the history of crypto AI, you kind of went through a couple of
Mhm.
humps already, and I'm curious. It seems like ages ago already, but I'm curious since like that meme agent wave of last summer or August
Yeah.
2024, spring 2024, fall 2024. Like, what do you think's changed? Because it feels so different now than where we were then.
Yeah, it's very different now. I would say, yes, last year we saw the rise of like different agents, and more importantly, we probably saw a lot of like tokenization of agents. But, in my opinion, I think a lot of that was driven by speculation and hype, right? And there wasn't really like much real utility baked into those agents. And
Mhm.
so fast forward to now we're seeing agents that are emerging that are driving utility. So we made investments into like the likes of Giza protocol that's kind of built out like these set of DeFi agents that can orchestrate yields on behalf of the end users. To we're seeing more progress, like you mentioned, Cloudflare and some of the work that they're doing with Coinbase's X402 protocol, right? And how do you kind of make agents give them the capability to make these headless payments over the traditional HTTP protocols. So we're seeing a lot more like utility across the board, and I think offer like unique offerings to end users to is ultimately just simplify how we as users will transact and engage on top of crypto rails.
Yeah. Yeah, that that's what I'm feeling too, and
Mhm.
it feels like during that period there were just a lot of entrepreneurs and founders and things that were racing towards that kind of first use case because there was a lot of opportunity and there was speculation and investment going into it, so it could power some different innovations. I'm curious now that it's almost matured in light speed. What projects are actually trying to tackle and trying to build the infrastructure and connect it all together. And you brought up Giza and actually show like credible, real
Mhm.
progress week over week. But like Giza's been working at it for a while. It
Yeah.
wasn't an overnight thing to get there. I'm curious because like you have a really nice perspective on what's happening at the forefront. What are like new founders, new teams starting to get really excited about in this space? Where's the next wave of passion focus, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of things, right? So, one being, I think we're entering a world where every single kind of like crypto UI or front end will have some type of natural language component, right? Where it becomes
Mhm.
very easy for you as the user to describe your intent, and then you're trusting the underlying system or a system of agents rather to deliver on that outcome. So, I think that kind of natural language interfaces is going to become table stakes. We're already seeing it. Like if you look at the new base app, you can talk directly to agents, right? You can go order pizza, you can pay for different services. So that's just gonna become like the user norm. Beyond like what we saw late last year with the likes of Giza and kind of like I would say more DeFi oriented agents or yield optimization. I think like the biggest area that I'm very excited about is like thinking about agents as robo advisors for on-chain wealth portfolios, right? And so I've
Mhm.
always kind of thought about the concept of what would Wealthfront or Betterment look like today on top of crypto rails powered by AI agents, where you're now trusting the agents to actually perform trades and build a portfolio on your behalf, right? That agent is given a goal to maximize profitability. You're setting different guardrails in terms of how you want to transact. You're giving it like context in terms of your risk to your prior full on-chain like kind of transaction history, and then letting that agent make decisions on your behalf. So I kind of equate this to crypto with the likes of like AI agents is entering its soft life era. And so
Yeah.
it's going to make it really easy for users, especially folks that are not crypto native, to be able to come in and transact on top of these rails.
Yeah, yeah, super aligned. So in our current arenas, we have agents that are competing to basically do
Mhm.
full loop portfolio management to maximize P&L or risk adjusted P&L in some cases. And for sure, some of those agents are far better at trading and managing crypto than I am. It's early days. There's a lot more proof to build up there. But I think the kind of proof is in the pudding, as they say. Like that's the way it's going to go. There's no way that I can be making even like the yield bearing case that you
Mhm.
or sorry, the yield agents that you brought up. Like there's just no way you can operate at the speed 24/7, be thinking about risks that are emerging and things like that. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. One thing that you say though, because there's two broad topics that you've now brought in. There's kind of this focus on these agents that are bridging crypto to more consumer users through like agents that are managing your wallet or portfolio, or and then there's this orchestration layer, so the X402 and payment rails and things like that. I wonder, are you uh, what do you think about kind of the decentralization of the agents themselves, and the idea that like maybe it's more than one agent operating in your wallet and there's actually lots of different micro use cases that need to be solved? Where do you strike a balance here in kind of more monolithic teams solving complete systems versus a lot of different agents running on crypto rails executing different things really optimally?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I think about it in two ways. So like on one hand, you have teams that are building, more, I would say more agentic platforms of sorts where you're kind of transacting with a swarm of agents. So give you an example, right? You have perhaps one agent, its role is just to be an orchestrator, right? And as an orchestrator, it takes in inputs from various users, and then it will then evaluate, okay, what are the agents that I have access to that I can now outsource completion of that task to that agent based on a set of predefined criteria, evaluation scores, benchmarks. This is probably like where recall can come in for sure. And so then you kind of going through a process, right? Okay, input comes into that orchestrator. Now that needs to go to an evaluator agent. Now that needs to go to an execution agent to deliver on that end user intent. So I think like you'll have users that are you'll have like developers rather that are building kind of like these more broad agentic platforms that consist of powering like swarms of different agents. And then I think you'll also have agents that are very specific, right? They have a niche, they're really good and optimized for doing one thing, and then they will be kind of surfaced through these broader platforms, whether that's kind of like agentic marketplaces where you can kind of go discover agents that kind of fit the bill for what you're trying to accomplish, to other types of platforms that will kind of just be agnostic to the types of agents that can onboard to fulfill those end user needs. But I think we'll kind of enter a world, the TLDR is that we'll enter a world where it's like multi-agent, multiple different type of systems, multiple different modalities that users can transact through. And I think that's probably like the ideal scenario that we'll see unfold as time progresses.
Yeah, and so that kind of comes back again to the payment rails and the coordination
Mhm.
protocols, and maybe for the folks that are listening that don't know what X402 is, or don't really haven't really even peeled back the layer of what agents are going to need in crypto or be able to do different in crypto. What's the what's your kind of unique statement, or like what's your pitch or framing why it's so obvious that stable coins being used by agents is obvious?
Yeah, well, stablecoins at the end of the day is, programmable money, right? And so agents themselves are code. They're, based on some predefined set of logic to accomplish a set goal. And so they're going to need very low cost, very fast and cheap transaction rails. And so I think that's where stablecoins come in, just given like the programmability. If you believe in a world where agents are going to be completing, let's say, X number of microtransactions, right, just to fulfill on a user intent, then they will need that low cost infrastructure. And then that's why I think like stable coins are, kind of the best fit for those agents to be able to transact effectively and kind of build out like this agentic economy long term.
What do you think some of the current kind of hold, like what's holding it back? What are some of the next big building blocks or pieces or small ones that you think are going to fall into place to start to bring this to the next level?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. Maybe on the infrastructure side, one, I've been thinking about long-term memory for
Yeah.
agents and like their ability to reason through transaction patterns and have a good understanding of just like the vastness of blockchain data. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect is we have yet to see a foundational crypto LLM, right? And so that's probably like one of the biggest gaps. I know like there's different like decentralized training players that are working on these type of use cases, but the ability to kind of take long-term memory and an agent's ability to recognize transaction patterns, have context on blockchain data, and then an LLM that uniquely understands like crypto history and can kind of process these user intents. I think those are like the next areas in terms of the infrastructure that's needed to power these agents that are going to transact on chain, reduce the hallucinations that we see, and also ultimately reduce the fidelity of prompts that are required in order for that agent to fulfill a certain intent. Right now, it kind of requires higher fidelity from the end user, but I think that that fidelity will lower over time as we kind of improve the underlying infrastructure.
Yeah, so that crypto native LLM for
Mhm.
you is one that's been RL'd on understanding, unpacking
Exactly.
everything down the stack. Yeah, yeah. Any projects working on that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of projects that we've seen that are working on that. Some of them are in stealth. So like I'm encouraged by the momentum that I'm seeing, but I do think like I said, that crypto LLM is going to be a big enabler to unlock these use cases as it relates to AI portfolio managers or agent portfolio managers to kind of like natural language interfaces embedded within DeFi and just kind of lowering the fidelity and the cognitive load that's required for users to fulfill their intents.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and then another area that you've spoken about and addressed a number of times is kind of the verifiability and trust here. Where do you think that fits?
Yeah, verifiability is very important, and I think we saw a lot of progress on that front. Like I said, as part of like this overall decentralized AI category, and so I think about decentralized AI as like bringing crypto into AI and helping AI inherit the properties of decentralized networks, right? So those are things like verifiability, transparency, democratized access, etc. And so verifiability becomes very important because now you need to be able to trust that the agent is doing exactly what you told it to do, right? So you set an objective, you gave that agent certain guardrails, and now you can use the blockchain rails to kind of verify that, okay, these outcomes are exactly what we desired, right? And if there are any issues, how do you kind of go back and go through the audit logs, which are open and transparent, and kind of debug any issues that can occur? And so, why this is so important is because when you think about you're giving agents access to financial value, those agents can't afford to make mistakes, right? Like one huge mistake that results in users losing trust into the system. And so that's why you need, protocols like a recall, et cetera, that are kind of introducing evaluation, things around benchmarking to verifying these different outputs. That becomes increasingly critical over time to kind of support the long-term viability of this growing agentic economy.
Where do you think where do you think the moats, if you kind of think that there will be moats, where do you think the moats are going to emerge for projects in crypto and AI?
Yeah, the most is probably going to emerge most likely at the infrastructure level, for example. So things around, like I mentioned, like long-term memory and like how you're building out like those long-term memory engines to the crypto LLMs and your unique proprietary data for training those LLMs. I think those are two areas. Other ways could be just through distribution. And so, if you're able to amass to create a platform or marketplace rather, where you kind of have access to these different agents, we think about agents having identity over time, right? Like decentralized identity, DIDs. And so, how do you kind of use that identity to create some type of reputation system for those agents, right? Where now any user can go and verify the history of that agent before they decide to transact with them. So I think the teams that are thinking about this more holistically, from the underlying engines that's powering the brains of that agent to the identity of that agent and its reputation and ability to transact, and then creating some type of distribution mechanism on top so that way users can access those agents. That's what it over time will create, very powerful differentiation and moats for the space.
Yeah, a couple things you said there make me
Mhm.
want to kind of jump into the future a
Sure.
little bit because if you had that crypto native LLM and the kind of cost to create software continues to just go down and down and down, you could imagine a lot of agents you might need could be almost built in real time. So there isn't going to be one agent necessarily that is the best always to solve a problem, but there could be thousands. There could be new ones in real time. How do you think about that next step into the future? I don't even know if a wallet will exist the way that we know it, but assuming it does, how are you going to contract how are you going to discover and contract the agents that actually are good and capable of solving your problems? How's that going to work in an open network?
Yeah, so I still think that you'll need some type of discovery and distribution hubs for those agents, right? And there's a plethora of different teams that are, kind of building towards that path. I think that the other thing as it relates to kind of bringing all of those different pieces together, like the crypto LLM to memory to identity, et cetera, the main thing for me is really thinking about one, how do you make sure that the agent is doing exactly what the user has defined for them to do, right? And how do we kind of make sure that there's the proper guardrails in place to make sure that we're governing those actions appropriately? And then lastly, just kind of like you mentioned, it's just really like the verifiability. And so the teams that are kind of building, there's one aspect of discovery and distribution, and I don't know what that is going to look like, but like one part of your question, and then we set this in our thesis, is that as we see more agents come on chain and the likes of, let's say, software creation agents, and now you're
Hmm.
kind of thinking about these agents that can increasingly create smart contract code, and they're creating hyper personalized applications on the fly. That's a very powerful kind of like paradigm that I think will unlock over time, and ultimately that leads to a Cambrian explosion of on-chain apps and experiences long term.
Yeah, absolutely. It, there's going to be this middle period though that it's going to be
Mhm.
quite messy.
Agreed.
You think about it like we just launched our network yesterday, and so you can imagine even humans are pretty fast at this. You know that scam where they name their meme token your contract address. So if people look for it on
Mhm.
different exchanges, they find a scam token. You can imagine AI pretty quickly, agents will be pretty quickly playing those games. In some of our arenas, we've even had agents mint their own meme coin in order to game P&L metrics and things like that that had to be detected by our community, which is both exciting. It means we're kind of entering that middle period where agents are getting a bit wild west and going out there, and that means that we need agents that do the other piece, which is detecting these things, and we need different on-chain proofs and different on-chain incentives that will keep it all aligned.
Yeah,
Um,
and I guess like just to chime in there, I think one, congrats on the launch, right, of
Thank
Recall. Like
you.
when I was checking out the site, one of the things I love is just this idea of like financialization of AI agents, and specifically financialization of the skills that those agents have, right? And so kind of creating again. Recall, I kind of see it as this marketplace for agent-based skills, right? Anyone can go create an agent. There are certain capabilities that those agents need to require, and then you're kind of creating this hub for back testing and evaluations to an open interface for benchmarking those agents, and that
Mhm.
those benchmarks then become part of reputation for those agents. So I think like all of those pieces are coming together, like where you have one part, the distribution, but you also have the verifiability. And then behind the scenes, what most people don't realize is that Recall, you're in a good position because you're like building out such unique like reinforcement learning data sets, right, that can then
Absolutely.
become powerful tools to power some of those crypto LLMs. So it's a really great like kind of flywheel that I think that you all have created.
Yeah, I'm really excited about some of the way that I can see the agent services fragmenting too. Like if you look at some of our early competitions, they are really getting those teams to build those full loop
Mhm,
portfolio management, which is actually probably the hardest problem to tackle first. But it's also the most exciting to watch, and it has a lot of messiness that it's
mhm,
fun, and teams are interested in trying to solve that. But you can imagine really quickly that the agents that are good at detecting alpha and changes in the ecosystem and on chain are not necessarily going to be the ones that are best at technical analysis and
mhm,
figuring out what other chains and other tokens to look at for context and things like that. And so I can see pretty quickly that our arenas would bifurcate, and there will be full portfolio management. There will also be agents that just can do the technical analysis and give you an up down thumb on a token and say, yeah, likely this is a good one to invest in for the next hour or the next week or whatever. And so kind of starting to layer that on, and then actually move out from just trading concepts too. And like you said, for the agent, it's that discovery and distribution hub.
mhm,
And part of that is reputation, and part of that is verifiability of past performance. I think one thing that I'm very excited about, aligned to you, that is tricky is the verifiability of the team and the agent and the execution. Those
mhm.
things are all still a little bit tough for teams to sew all together into a complete solution. But I know a lot of projects are working on it, and so I think we'll get there very quickly. Are there for as putting sort of your investor hat on? Are there sort of projects or founders you're like really hoping to see soon? Not specifics, but just areas.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, on the infrastructure side, so memory and contextual reasoning, definitely want to see like more developments there. The build out of like a crypto LLM, that to me is like very exciting. And then I think overall we're entering this phase of just consumer AI in general, right? I'm seeing like a
Mhm.
plethora of different, like AI agent chatbots or chat interfaces where you can go in and you can do deep research specific to crypto, right? Whether, there's Masari's Copilot out in APAC, there's a team called Surf.ai that has like really, really great reasoning and, kind of bringing in data from XAI, for example. So that's been something exciting to see. And I think over time, like how that evolves into these actual AI portfolio managers where now these agents are trading on your behalf, that to me is like the nirvana state, right? Because now I can kind of connect the full end-to-end transaction lifecycle,
Yeah.
deposit stable coins into those agents. Those agents are then, try to maximize my portfolio and, kind of trading on my behalf. I now take those profits and give that over to a yield agent, for example, right? That's just kind of increasing, growing the pie in a sense. And so I think like all of those pieces are coming together, and we're really encouraged by the momentum we're seeing from different founders in the space that are building towards that future.
Well, Jonathan, this has been awesome. Thank you